The airplane hummed softly beneath my seat, the vibration echoing through my chest like a nervous heartbeat. Outside the small oval window, the world stretched into clouds, soft, white, and distant, the way my memories had become. I hadn't been home in 5 years. 5 years since I'd run away with a single suitcase, a university scholarship, and a promise whispered through tears. I'll never come back until I can face him without fear. Now I was coming back, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to see what remained of the girl who once fled. The stewardess smiled as we began to descend. "Welcome home," she said cheerfully. I almost laughed. Home, what a delicate word. For me, it was a battlefield painted to look like a family. I remembered the smell of burnt tea, the echo of my mother's silence, and the sharp, heavy ring of my stepfather Rashid's belt on the wooden floor. Even after all these years, I could still hear the sound of it slicing through air before it struck. When the plane touched down, my fingers trembled. The announcement played in the background, but my mind was already thousands of miles away. At the doorstep of that house I had once prayed to escape forever. The taxi ride from the airport was silent. The city had changed, new billboards, unfamiliar buildings. But the air still felt the same. It carried that mix of dust and memory that stuck to your lungs, and then there it was, the gate, rusted but standing, just like my fear. I hesitated before ringing the bell, my heart pounding against my ribs. For a moment, I thought about walking away, pretending this trip never happened, but before I could decide, the door opened. Rashid stood there, older, broader, but with the same eyes. Cold, calculating, his lips curved into something that almost looked like a smile. "Well," he said, his voice sharp as glass, "look who decided to come back." I forced a smile. "Hello, Rashid. It's been a long time." He stepped closer. I could smell the faint scent of whiskey on his breath. "You think you can just walk in here after running away?" "I just wanted to visit," I managed to say, my voice shaking despite every wall I'd built inside me. His hand moved faster than thought. The slap cracked across my face like lightning. "Welcome back," he whispered, his voice full of venom. My cheek burned, my eyes watered, but I didn't look away. Not this time. I had boarded the first flight home knowing pain might greet me at the door. What I hadn't expected was how calm I'd feel afterward, because beneath the sting, I felt something new. Not fear, not regret, just quiet, rising fire. I woke the next morning with my cheek still swollen, the sting of his hand echoing long after the pain had dulled. The mirror on the wall reflected a face I barely recognized, bolder, sharper, but carrying the same quiet ache I thought I'd left behind. The girl who had run away was gone. The woman in the reflection looked like someone who'd come back for answers. Downstairs, the house felt smaller than I remembered. The walls seemed to lean closer, suffocating with memories. My mother sat at the dining table, her hands wrapped around a cold cup of tea. When she saw me, her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't say a word. She never did. "Breakfast," Rashid grunted, without looking at me. His voice still carried that tone of command, that belief that he owned everything he touched. I quietly took a seat, forcing myself to eat. Every bite tasted like ashes. 5 years, he said finally, setting down his newspaper. "You think you can just vanish and then show up like nothing happened. I had a scholarship," I replied softly. "I went to study." He scoffed. "You ran away. You embarrassed this family." His hand slammed against the table, rattling the cups. My mother flinched, her gaze fixed on the floor. Once I would have cried. Once I would have begged for peace. But this time I just sat there calm, unmoving, letting him see that I wasn't the same frightened girl he remembered. After he left for work, I turned to my mother. "Why didn't you say anything?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Tears slipped down her cheeks. "You don't understand," she said. "He can't be fought." "Yes," I murmured. "He can, you were just too scared to try." Her silence was answer enough. That evening, I walked through the neighborhood, letting the wind cool my burning thoughts. I found myself at an old cafe, the one I used to visit after school. Inside sat Zara, my childhood friend. Her eyes widened as she recognized me, and soon we were sitting across from each other, talking like years hadn't passed. When I told her what happened, her expression hardened. He hasn't changed, has he? No, I said, but I have. Zara leaned closer. Then don't let him win this time. You always said you'd come back stronger, prove it. That night, lying in my old room surrounded by ghosts of my past, I realized she was right. I wasn't here just to remember. I was here to end the story properly. My cheek still hurt, but beneath the bruise was something fierce and alive. I whispered to the darkness, this time I won't run. This time I'll make him pay. Days turned into weeks, and I learned to move like a shadow inside that house. Rashid shouted, demanded, and drank, just as he always had, but I no longer shrank beneath his voice. I listened, observed, waited. Every cruel word, every careless secret he muttered, after whiskey became a thread I began to pull. He thought I'd come back defeated. That was his first mistake. When he was gone, I explored the house. The drawers, the study, the locked cabinet he once forbade me from touching. Inside, I found files, receipts, and a set of documents bearing names I didn't recognize. Bank statements, forged signatures, donation letters to charities that didn't exist. I smiled faintly, so this was where his power came from. That evening, I called Zara. You still have contacts in the city office? I asked. I do, she said cautiously. What are you planning, Ayla? Justice. I whispered. Slow, quiet justice. Over the next few days, I gathered evidence. Photos of documents, voice recordings of his drunken rants about money and favors owed to him. I disguised my calm with obedience, pouring his tea, nodding at his arrogance, pretending to be broken. He loved that. He always loved power disguised as pity. My mother noticed the change in me. One night, as I tucked her shawl over her shoulders, she asked, What are you doing, Ayla? You look like someone with a secret. I smiled softly. Maybe I am. She didn't press. Maybe she was afraid to hope. Maybe she had forgotten what freedom tasted like. By the third week, Zara and I had built a digital trail of his crimes: tax evasion, money laundering, even bribes to local officials. Each revelation made me colder inside, not from fear but from clarity. Every bruise I'd ever hidden now had a purpose. I began leaving subtle hints to make him nervous: a misplaced paper here, an anonymous letter there. Watching him squirm, watching his confidence crack, was its own quiet revenge. One night, he confronted me. You've been snooping, he growled, gripping my wrist. His eyes burned with suspicion. Don't forget who owns this house. I met his stare and said evenly, You don't own the truth, Rashid. For a moment, confusion flickered in his face, replaced quickly by rage. He threw me aside, shouting, but this time I didn't cry. I just looked at him and smiled. That terrified him more than tears ever could. After he stormed out, I whispered to myself, Tomorrow, the fire starts. Because revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it burns quietly until the right wind arrives to turn it into a storm. Morning sunlight poured through the curtains, painting the room in gold. But there was nothing warm about the day. My heart felt steady, my plan complete. Everything I had worked for during those silent weeks was ready to unfold. I sat at the kitchen table, sipping tea, waiting for the noise to begin. Rashid stormed in with fury already on his face. His empire was crumbling. Overnight, the news channels had exploded with stories of fraud, stolen charity funds, and illegal property deals. His name flashed across headlines like a brand of shame. He slammed the newspaper down. You did this, he shouted, veins bulging on his neck. You think you can ruin me? I looked up at him, calm as ever. You ruined yourself a long time ago. He lunged toward me, grabbing my arm, shaking me violently. My mother screamed, trying to pull him away, but he shoved her aside. Ungrateful girl, he roared. After everything I've given you, I laughed softly. You gave me bruises and fear. Now I'm giving you what you deserve. That laugh drove him over the edge. He struck me hard, the world blurred, my ears ringing. But I didn't fall. I stared right into his eyes, unflinching. For the first time, I saw fear in his. The front door burst open. Police officers rushed in, their boots echoing like thunder. Rashid froze, confusion twisting into panic. Mr. Rashid Khan. One officer barked, You are under arrest for embezzlement, tax fraud, and assault. He turned to me, betrayal written across his face, you call them. I stepped closer, blood at the corner of my lip, and whispered, "No, I prepared this weeks ago." They cuffed him, his curses echoing down the hallway. My mother stood trembling, her hands over her mouth as the sirens wailed outside. When the door closed behind him, silence filled the house for the first time in years, a silence that didn't hurt. My mother sank into a chair, crying softly. I knelt beside her and took her hand. "It's over," I said gently. "We're free now." She looked at me with a kind of fragile awe. "You're stronger than I ever was." "No," I said. I just stopped being afraid. 2 weeks later, I stood at the airport again, suitcase by my side, but this time I wasn't running away. I was moving forward. My mother joined me, her hand finding mine. Together, we boarded the flight, leaving behind a house that had been a cage for too long. As the plane rose into the clouds, I watched the city shrink below us and whispered to myself, "He said welcome back once, but I didn't come back as his daughter. I came back as his reckoning."